This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So before I begin, I just want to dedicate today's learning. My friend Rabbi William Fanfetter has yahrzeit for his father, Gabriel Ben Ze'ev, and because of the matziv, it's not always possible to daven with a minyan and to say Kaddish. So firstly, we know there's an idea that if somebody wants to do a mitzvah, and there are extenuating circumstances, Chishev Lasos mitzvah v'nenas v'lo yasa, mala olav kilo asa. So the desire to say Kaddish should be accrued to the merit of Gavriel Ben Ze'ev, and may the learning today be an Eloi for his neshama. Okay, so we have a very interesting subject today. Today's topic is Saturday night with the Israeli cab driver. And it's predicated on the fact that in Parshas Kedoshim we encounter the lav of Lifnei Iver lo sitein michshal. Before a blind person, do not place a stumbling block. Now, literally that means if somebody's walking on the road and they're blind and they have their walking stick and you're hiding in the bushes, so one would think that the Torah is saying, don't throw a banana peel to cause the person to stumble. And yet, interestingly, if somebody does throw a banana peel in front of a blind person, they actually do not violate the law of Lifnei Ivar lo sitein michshal. Because Lifnei Ivar lo sitein michshal, according to Gemara, refers to giving somebody bad advice. But the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, if you would have a sheet, or if you want to go back to the Shiur after, Be'ez Hashem, I'll try to send out Mar Makomis after, and you could listen to it and follow along. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Daf Vav Amud Aleph, going on to Vav Amud Beis, which is number 3 on the sheets, brings the opinion of Reb Nosson that how do I know one should not stick out and extend a cup of wine to a nazir, or a limb from a living being to a ben noyach. So Talmud Loimar v'lifnei Ivar lo sitei michshal. So from there we learn that one is not allowed to cause and facilitate and abet someone to do an avera. So the Gemara says that the Gemara even asks, but the person could have done the avera without you. So if you don't pass the wine to the nazir, they could have got up and gotten the wine themselves. If you don't pass the Iver Menachai to the Ben Noyach, he could have got up and got the Iver Menachai himself. So why are you over Lifnei Iver lo sitei michshal? So the Gemara says we're talking about where it's on two sides of the river. So in fact, he could not have gotten it without you. So you're standing on one side of the Hudson River, and the Nazir says, hey, pass the wine. So you take the bottle of wine and you give it your best fastball, and you get it all the way across the Hudson. If you facilitate the Nazir from doing an Avera, you're over Lifnei Iver lo sitein michshal. If you facilitate the Ben Noyach from eating Iver Menachai, you're over Lifnei Iver lo sitein michshal. And the question that is raised by Rabbi Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg, the Tzitz Eliezer, who was one of the Poiskei Hadar, the last star, the Poisek of Shari Tzedek Hospital, in Chelek Yud Aleph Siman Lamed Daled, he was asked, how would one be allowed to hail or to call a taxi cab on Motzei Shabbos? Most taxi drivers are probably Jewish. In all likelihood, they're secular and they're not Shomrei Torah mitzvahs. Most probably, they did not make Havdalah, and even if they didn't make Havdalah, they probably didn't even say Hamavdil Bein Kodesh L'Choel. So how could you hail the taxi on a Saturday night, but you are facilitating them to do an Avera? You're causing them to do an Avera. Because, we could discuss, would they have been driving without you? But let's say, for argument's sake, they don't necessarily have jobs every hour on the hour, and maybe it's because of you that they have work on Saturday night, and you are causing them to do malacha. So you say, what's wrong with causing someone to do malacha? The Shulchan Aruch paskins in Archaim and Siman Reish Sadi Tes Sif Yud, Asar la'asay shum malacha kaidem she'avdo. You're not allowed to do any malacha before you make havdalah. So it's an isser in Shulchan Aruch. One cannot do malacha before havdalah, and if that's the case, by hailing this taxi cab, so what are you going to do? You're only going to use the religious Jew? You're going to call up the company? Do you have any Shomer Torah mitzvahs? I don't know if that's possible, but certainly if you already got in the cab and you realize the guy is Jewish and he's not Shomer Torah mitzvahs, maybe you need to get out. How could you cause someone to do an Avera, to do Malacha on Matzoi Shabbos before he makes Havdalah? That's the Shaila that is raised by the Tzitz Eliezer, and as we're going to see, many of the Poskim discuss the Shaila. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Moshe Feinstein Zeches HaGlavracha, the Sefer Lev Avram, Rav Aaron Leib Steinman, and they all discuss this inyan and this issue of how could you hail a secular cab driver on Matzoi Shabbos. But the problem is, the question is that you are going to be causing and facilitating someone to do malacha on Matzoi Shabbos before Havdalah. So now, you'll say, well, if I would not hail him down, in all probability, in all likelihood, he would have a job without me. He would have work without me, and if he would have work without me, so then I'm not causing him to do an Aveira. So now let's address this question. Because the Gemara in Avodah Zarah said that when are you now to pass wine to a Nazir? When are you now to give Iver Menachai to a Goy? That's when it's Koi betray every dinara on two sides of the river. Meaning the Nazir could not have gotten the wine without you. And the Ben Noach could not have gotten the Iver Menachai without you. But the question is, let's say the Nazir could have got the wine without you. Let's say the Ben Noach could have gotten the Iver Menachai without you. Are you allowed to give it to him? Because yes, he could have done it without me, but I'm still aiding, abetting, and facilitating. So what about if it's Chad Ivri Dinara? What if it's one side of the river? So if it's one side of the river, we're about to encounter something fascinating. The Mordechai in Avodah Zarah on Ois Taf Shin Tzadi He discusses the following case. He wants to know, are you allowed to lend money to a goy bizman hazeh if they're going to use the money to purchase offerings and sacrifices for Avodah Zarah on the day of their holiday? And the Mordechai says that it is permitted, because what are you going to lend them already? Whatever you're going to lend them, they could have borrowed from another guy. Likewise, says the Mordechai, my Rebbe, the Rebbe Aviha Ezri in his Sefer says in the name of his father, Rabbeinu Yoel, that you're allowed to lend and sell. Do we have any shmata salesmen here? If anyone in the garment industry, in the beged industry, let's say somebody manufactures begadim, let's say begadim for koimrim, begadim for priests. Are you allowed to sell a priest his garment to do his service in? It's going to be the garment that he praises and sings all of his hymns in. Are you allowed to sell that to a koimer? Says the Mordechai in the name of his Rebbe Avi Ezri, that you're allowed to sell a guy, a koimer. You're allowed to sell a koimer his beged for his holiday and for his service, even as long as he could have bought it from someone else. In other words, anytime it's Chad Ivri Dinara, anytime it's one side of the river, anytime somebody could do an Avera without you, then by you facilitating and abetting, it is not a lav in the Torah, it's not lifnei iver, it's not a drabanan. There's no problem with it, and therefore the psak of the Mordechai is that the Gemara in Avodah Zarah that says you can't hand wine to a Nazir and you can't hand the Iver Menachai to a Ben Noach, that's specifically talking about two sides of the river. But if it would be one side of the river, it is permitted. And there's no concept of aiding, facilitating, and abetting. However, not all Rishonim agree with the Mordechai. There are Rishonim that hold that even when the person could have done the Aver without you, but if you're assisting and facilitating, you may not be violating Lifnei Iver Le'sitei Michshel, but you are violating the concept of what is called Misayeya Lidei Oivrei Avera. And this is enunciated by Tosfos and Masechta Shabbos on Daf Gimel, the top of the page. We're all familiar, the first Mishnah on Shabbos talks about the scenario, the Balabayas and the Ani, where the Balabayas sticks out the bread and he puts it in the basket of the Ani. So we know to be Chayiv on Shabbos for carrying, you have to do 3 things basically. You have to do an Akira, you have to do an uprooting, you have to do a Hanacha, and you have to transfer the Reshuyos. So basically, we always say that if the Balabayas picks up the loaf of bread, transfers it into the Reshus HaYachid, puts it down in the hands of the Ani, the Balabayas is Chayiv, and the Mishnah says the Ani is Pater, but Tosfos asks, why is the Ani Pater and Mutter? But the Ani is Oiver, L'chayra, should be Oiver, L'fnei Iver Lo'sitein Mechshal, because without his hand, without his basket, the Balabayas would not have anything to put down on. So he is facilitating the Balabayas from doing an Avera. The Balabayas could not have done it without him, so he should be Oiver L'fnei Iver. Tosfos says, and even if you're going to say that he could have put it down without the Ani, so you're not Oiver L'fnei Iver L'sitei Milchsha, but nevertheless, by him stretching out his hand, he's facilitating, and it's an Isser D'Rabbanan. What's that? You're Chayiv to separate the Balabayas from Isser. Meaning any time you can't assist him, you can't facilitate the Avera. No, you have an obligation to stop him, to prevent him, to be mafresh him from Isser. And since you have an obligation to be mafresh him from Isser, maybe you're not over l'fnei iver l'sitei mechshel, but you're over misayeya lidei over avera. In fact, the Rosh in the beginning of Masechta Shabbos says, where does this Isser D'Rabbanan come from? Says the Rosh, it emanates as follows. Because we know if we see a katan who's eating nevelos, Bezdin is commanded to be mafresh him from eating a nevela. So if you're commanded to be mafresh a katan from eating a nevela, alachas kama v'kama, a gadol, you cannot facilitate and assist a gadol to do an avera. And therefore the Rosh and Tosfos hold that even if it's chad ivri de nahara, it's still considered misayeli de ivri avera. So right now, at this point in the shiur, if I were to ask you, is there any prohibition in hailing a irreligious cab driver to drive you Motzei Shabbos, where presumably if you don't hail him down, he would be driving anyway? Is it mutter or aser? So the correct answer should be, it's a machlokes. The Mordechai says if somebody could do an aver without you, you're allowed to facilitate. So according to the Mordechai, you could hail down the cab driver. And according to Tosfos, where one is not allowed to facilitate an avera even if the person was able to do it without you, so it would be an Isser D'Rabbanan. So the correct answer to the question is machlokes. It's a machlokes between Mordechai and Tosfos. Mordechai would say it is mutter, and Tosfos would say mutter. And Tosfos, the Mordechai would say it's mutter, it's permitted, and Tosfos would say aser, it's an Isser D'Rabbanan. Now, how do we paskin? Comes the Ramah in Yeridea, Siman Kuf Nun Aleph, Sif Vav, Sif Aleph, and the Ramah says, Yesh Oimrim, Hada Aser Limkor Lahem Dvarim Hashayachim Lavaydasa. Some say that this said it is prohibited to sell to a goyim something that's relevant to their service. Hainu Davgam Ein Lahem Achim. That's if they don't have others. Or they can't buy it elsewhere. But if they could buy it elsewhere, mutter limkar lahem kol davar, you're allowed to sell them anything. So the Ramah brings the first opinion. The first opinion is that the Isser of selling to a guy is only if they couldn't get it elsewhere. If they could get it elsewhere, you're allowed to sell them big day Avodah Zarah. Whose opinion is this? The Mordechai, of course, in the first parak of Avodah Zarah. Then the Ramah says, V'yesh machmirin. There are those who are machmir. Who's machmir? Tosfos. V'noagu lahakel kisvar rishona. The minog is to be lenient like the Mordechai. But v'chol bal nefesh yachmir la'atzmai. Any sensitive person should be machmir for himself. So if I were to ask you, who is the Ramah paskening like? Is the Ramah paskening like the Mordechai Lakula or like Tosfos L'chumra? Firstly, we would say he's certainly paskening like the Mordechai Lekula, because he says the minhag is to be meko, like the first opinion. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's paskening like the Mordechai. He's just saying that the minhag is like the Mordechai. However, in the Tshuvas to the Chavos Yair and Siman Kuf Pehei, he says that actually the Ramah is clearly mashma that the halacha is like the Mordechai Lekula and not like Tosfos L'chumra. Because when he quotes the Mordechai, he quotes a Yesh Oimrim. But when he quotes Tosfos, he doesn't say V'yesh Oisrim. He says V'yesh Machmirin. And since he classifies the Shita of Tosfos as a Chumrah, therefore, since he classifies the Tosfos as a Chumrah, that implies that his mind, his das, is noita with the matirim, and this, says the Chavos Yair, is a klal in general in learning the Ramah. So it comes out something very interesting, something very fascinating. According to this step in the Shiur, according to this stage in the Shiur, would one be able to hail down a non-Jewish, a secular cab driver? The halacha would be mutter. Why would it be mutter? Because even though the Mordechai says mutter and Tosfos says asur, the Ramah seems to paskin like the Mordechai, and he says it's a chumrah, it's a bal nefesh, should be machmer. So you want to be a super tzaddik, so don't hail down the cab driver. But me'ikar hadin, it would be mutter. Now I will tell you, this shaila is not only relevant on Saturday night, on Matzah Shabbos, it's relevant Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday as well. One cannot do malacha Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday because until Havdalah. One cannot do malacha at all unless one makes Havdalah. So according to this step in the Shiur, one would be able to commission and hail a irreligious cab driver. However, comes the Shach. And the Shach in Yoredeya, Siman Kuf Nun Aleph, Sivkat and Vav, says, not so fast. What's not so fast? Comes the Shach, and the Shach says that in his opinion the Ramah made a mistake. That the Ramah did not learn the Sugya correctly in terms of understanding the Mordechai and Tosfos. Again, the Ramah understood the Mordechai across the board allows one to facilitate an Avera as long as the person could have done it without you, and Tosfos says one cannot do it. Says the Shach, you're making a big mistake, Ramah. In my opinion, says the Shach, there is no machloikis between the Mordechai and Tosfos. The Mordechai is talking about one type of case, and Tosfos is talking about another kind of case. The Mordechai is talking about a Gentile. Tosfos is talking about a Yid. Says the Ramah, says the Shach, in my opinion, Mordechai and Tosfos agree. Sometimes there is Messiah, sometimes there's not Messiah. Says the Shach, when we're dealing with Goyim, in the situation of the Mordechai, we're selling the garments of Avodah Zarah to a Goy, then there's no Isser of Messiah Alidei Over Avera. Because the whole Isser of Messiah Alidei Over Avera is emanating from a Kavachomer. That if you see a Katan eating an Avela, you have to stop him. Certainly you cannot assist the Gadol. Okay, certainly you cannot assist a Gadol who's a Yid. But a Gadol who's a guy, we have no Makar that you're not to be Messiah Alidei Over Avera. And therefore says the Ramah, therefore says the Shach, the Mordechai is talking about a guy. To a guy, you're allowed to be Messiah. You're allowed to sell a guy big day kaimrim if he could have got it without you. And even Tosfos would agree that to a guy, you're allowed to be Messiah L'idei Over Avera. But even the Mordechai would agree that in a scenario of a Jew, let's say in the Gemara in Shabbos, in the Mishnah in Shabbos, the Ani cannot facilitate the Balabayas sticking his hand out of the Rishus Harabim, because when it comes to a Jew, even the Mordechai would agree to Tosfos that since Bezdin is mitzuvah to be mafresh a katan from eating nevelos, certainly a Yisrael cannot be Messiah. Says the Shach, Kol Zela Das Harav. This split between the Mordechai and Tosfos is the Rama's opinion. But in my opinion, they don't argue. Everyone agrees to the Mordechai and Tosfos in the beginning of Avodah Zarah. That to a guy, it is permitted. Because he's talking about an Avodas Kochavim. And Tosfos and the Rosh are talking about a Yisrael, where you're chayiv to mafreshim from Isser. So according to this stage in the Shiur, now by the way, I want to tell you something. The Ksav Sofer in Yaredea, Siman Pei Gimel, says the Shach comes mizera Aroin, and therefore he comes to make peace between the Rishonim, that Tosfos, the Rosh, and the Mordechai do not argue that the Shita of Tosfos of Messiah is only to a Jew. The Shita that Messiah is mutter, according to the Mordechai, is only to a guy. So according to this stage in the Shiur, and by the way, Rav Moshe writes in a tshuva, we don't paskin like the Ramah. Says Rav Moshe, we paskin like the Shach, the Igrois Moshe, in Even HaEzer, Chelek Daled, Simin Samach Aleph, Ois Beis. Rav Moshe says that we paskin that there's no Isser Misayeli de Oivei Avera to Goyim, only to Yidden. So right now, according to this stage in the Shiur, would you be able to hail down the Jewish cab driver? So he said the Ramah would paskin that you are allowed to. But we don't paskin like Ramah. We paskin like the Shach. And the Shach says, to a Jew, you are not allowed to be Misayel idei Oivei Avera. However, not so fast. Because if you look in the Shach conveniently made a split between the Mordechai and Tosfos. And the Shach said the Mordechai who says Messiah de Oivei Avera is permitted is talking about a guy. Tosfos that says Messiah de Oivei Avera is prohibited is talking about a Jew. Comes the Shach, and the Shach says, and what about a Yisrael Mumar? What about an irreligious Jew? What about a Jew who is not observant? The Shach classifies him as a guy, that the Isser of Messiah does not apply. If you look carefully in the Shach says that the Isser of Messiah does not apply to a guy or to a Yisrael Mumar. But it does apply to a regular Jew. So, and, by the way, why would the Shach say it doesn't apply to Yisrael Mumar? So the Noda B'Yehuda explains that where does it come from? What's the source of Messiah de Oivei Avera? What's the makar of this chumrah, of this prohibition to assist and abet someone to do an Avera if they could have done it without you? The Rosh says it's learned out from a Kavachomer, that if you see a katan who's eating nevelos, you have to stop him. Certainly, if you see a gadol doing an Avera, you have to stop him. Says the Noda B'Yehuda, what's the reason you have to stop a kid from doing an Avera? Says the Noda B'Yehuda, because the kid is a shoygeg. But says the Noda B'Yehuda, anytime someone is not a shoygeg, they're a mumar, or even so you'll say the Israeli cab driver, he's not a mumar, he is a tinoik shenishba, okay, but he's still a mezid. He's not doing it unintentionally. He's intentionally driving on Shabbos. So says the Noda B'Yehuda, the Isser of Messiah is learnt out from, I have to stop a katan from doing an Avera, but that's only because, says the Noda B'Yehuda, he's a shoygeg. Anytime someone is amazed, someone's intentionally doing an Avera, there is no Isser of Messiah de Oivei Avera. There's no Isser Messiah. Says the Noda B'Yehuda, says the Shach, the Isser of Messiah de Oivei Avera does not apply to a Yisrael Mumar, does not apply to someone who is irreligious, and therefore at this stage in the Shiur, are you allowed to hail down an Israeli cab driver? The answer is yes, but I'm assisting, but he's a Yisrael Mumar and he's doing it b'mezid, and you're allowed to assist a mezid in doing an Avera. And this is where the Shiur really begins. Because comes the Tzitz Eliezer in Chelek Yud Aleph Siman Lamed Daled, number 17, comes the Lev Avram, Rav Avram Weinfeld, in number 16, Shalos Tshuvos Siman Ayin Gimel, and he says, not so fast. This din of the Shach, this din of the Noid Behuda, that when it comes to someone who could have done an Aver without you, you're allowed to assist them if they're amazed. That's when the scenario is similar to the scenario of a Nazir or a Ben Noyach, where you tell the Nazir, hey Nazir guy, would you like some, where the Nazir says to you, hey Mr. Wine holder, pass the wine. Where the Gentile says, hey Mr. Ever Menachai possessor, pass the Ever Menachai. So then in that case, when it's his idea, and he could have done the Aver without you, and you're merely assisting him, then we say that you're allowed to assist him. But says Rabbi Weinfeld, says the Tzitz Eliezer, in this case, who's hailing down who? You're hailing him down. You're calling him. So now it's your initiative. You're starting the process. You're insinuating. You're encouraging. You're the one who started it. When you start it, even when he could have done it without you, then everyone would agree you're not allowed to aid and assist. The din that you're allowed to assist a koimer, let's say, in his big day avodah zarah, that's when he's coming to you to sell, to buy. But when it's your idea, when you're the one hailing him down, even if he could have done it without you, says the Lev Avram, says the Tzitz Eliezer, you're not allowed to. And therefore the Lev Avram says, let's say you own a bookstore, and you want to sell Sifrei Chitzoinim, Apikarsa stick of books. Are you allowed to do that? So you say, why not? If he doesn't buy it from me, he'll get it from Barnes & Noble, get it from Amazon. Yeah, but it's your idea. You're encouraging him. You're advertising. You're trying to persuade him to buy it. You can't do that. And therefore in the Sefer Shmiras Shabbos Kilchasa, he brings down that he heard from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that in all likelihood you're not allowed to hail down a irreligious cab driver Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, because it could be he would not have a job without you. And even if he would, it's Messiah Lidei Oivrei Aveira. He's not religious, but it's your idea. In other words, there's no heter of Messiah Lidei Oivrei Aveira, says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and you cannot hail down the irreligious cab driver. Now obviously this becomes an untenable situation. Because in Israel, by the way, what's Israel? Israel is a country people used to go to in the olden days when travel was allowed and there were airlines and airplanes. Be'ezus Hashem, we should come back to that very soon. But this would be an untenable situation to say that you cannot hail down a secular cab driver on Matzah Shabbos. So this is what we want to investigate today. What eitzah is there? Is there any program? Is there any opportunity? Is there any way out? Is there any heter to be able to hail down a secular cab driver? So the Tzitz Eliezer, in number 19, quotes his friend, Rav Yosef Kohen, who was Rav Yosef Kohen was on the old Bezdin in Yerushalayim with Rav Elyashiv. He's the father of the current Rosh Hashiva of Chevron, Rav David Kohen. And when I was learning in Eretz Yisrael, I had the zechus to hear a shir from him. And Rav Yosef Kohen suggested that it would be permitted to hail down the secular cab driver. What you do is, you hail him down, and you say first, you introduce your going into the cab by saying Shavua Tov, and then he'll respond to you Shavua Tov. And saying Shavua Tov is comparable to saying Hamavdu ben Kodesh T'chol. And this way you got him to make Havdalah of sorts. And this way you could get into the car. However, says the Tzitz Eliezer, in my opinion, you are not Yotzei Havdalah by saying Shavua Tov. it is not in no way comparable to saying Hamavda ben Kosh L'Chayil. As the Rambam writes in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, the Mitzvah Saseh Kuf Nun Hey, that Havdalah is part of Zechiras Shabbos. And part of Zechiras Shabbos is you have to speak about the greatness of Shabbos and its differentiation between Shabbos and the days of the week. So I understand Kiddush, you sanctify Shabbos and you elevate it, and you speak about its greatness. But by just saying Shavua Tov, says the Tzitz Eliezer, in his opinion, one is not fulfilling the obligation of Shabbos. Now the Rivavos Ephraim brings down this Eitzah that is brought by Rabbi Yosef Kohen, that if you want to get into a taxi Saturday night and it's a Nahag Chiloni, it's proper to first introduce yourself by saying Shavua Tov, so that he'll respond Shavua Tov, and then it's Matzah Shabbos for him, and he's allowed to do Malacha. And he writes that he even heard that Rav Shlomo Zalman used to do this himself, which is hard, which is a little bit questionable, considering the fact that in the Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa, he says that he heard from Rav Shlomo Zalman himself that Rav Shlomo Zalman said you shouldn't get into the secular cab. But this is sort of hearsay, because he said he didn't hear it from Rav Shlomo Zalman himself. The Rivavos Ephraim said he heard that Rav Shlomo Zalman used to do this. But then the Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa, he brings that perhaps saying Shavua Tov is good enough, based on the opinion of Rabbi Kiva Eger. Because Rabbi Kiva Eger says, there's a whole issue Friday night, that when you come home Friday night, you've already been Yotzei Kiddush D'Oraisa in Mariv by saying Vayichulu in Mariv, and your wife has not fulfilled her obligation Midoraisa, and your Chiyuv is only Midrabanan, because you're already Yotzei Midoraisa, and your wife is Chayiv Midoraisa. How could you be Moitzi your wife? So there's this Shita of Rabbi Kiva Eger, that when you say Good Shabbos, Shabbos Tova, that's also Kiddush D'Oraisa. So it was argued that, according to Rabbi Kiva Eger, that just like saying Good Shabbos is a fulfillment of Kiddush D'Oraisa, perhaps saying Gotvach or Shavua Tov is Havdalah D'Oraisa. And the Tzitz Eliezer in Chelek Yud Beis Melamed Zayin says no, in his opinion it's not comparable at all. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, in my opinion, when you say Good Shabbos, at least you're speaking about the elevation of Shabbos and the praise of Shabbos and its grandeur vis-a-vis the days of the week. But when you say Shavua Tov, you're not saying anything about the Shabbos. And therefore, just because by saying Shabbat Shalom, you're Yotzei Kiddush, by saying Shavua Tov, in no way are you Yotzei Havdalah. So we're sort of up the creek without a taxi cab. Because according to what we're saying, by the way, that was a joke, and I know you're all muted, but you're probably laughing hysterically. So, I'm going to give you a moment to calm down after that humorous remark. But we're up the creek without a paddle, because how do you hail down the Israeli cab driver, even though he's irreligious, and there's no Isser of Messiah, but again we mentioned it's your idea, and L'chayra saying Gutavach or Shavua Tov does not constitute Havdalah. Okay, so just ask everyone to mute. So I want to share with you Mamish a Ga'oinus. This is a Ga'oinus of the Tzitz Eliezer, as well as Reb Aaron Leib Steinman in his Sefer Ayeles HaShachar on Parshas Eikev. Now it's interesting. I always thought Ayeles HaShachar, Ayeles is, Aaron Yehuda Leib. And what's the tough? Better than Ayel, you need a word. But interestingly, the Ayeles is Aaron Yehuda Leib, and tough is Tamar. So, and Tamar was his wife. So it was sort of in honor and in dedication to his wife. So I want to share with you the Lamdus of Rav Aaron Leib Steinman and the Tzitz Eliezer, and they say Mamish Ga'oinus, a beautiful pshat to explain why, in fact, one would be permitted to hail the irreligious cab driver on Saturday night. So the Gemara said that if you have a field, if you have an orchard, you could travel to the orchard on Shabbos, pick the fruits on Shabbos, and carry it back when Shabbos is over. So the Gemara said, what? The Gemara in Shabbos daf kuf nun on Mebez. But you didn't make Havdalah. And the halacha is, Amar Rabbi Lazar ben Antignois, Mishum Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov, one is not allowed to do any malacha before Havdalah. And if you're going to say he made Havdalah and Tefillah, but we know you have to make Havdalah al kois. And if you're going to say he made Havdalah al kois, how did he have a kois in the field? No, it's near the wine vat, and there was wine there. Says the Gemara, Amar le Rav Abba Rav Ashi, in Eretz Yisrael, we say as follows, Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chol, and we do whatever we need to do. Now, there's a major machlokes over here. This Havdalah of Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chol, what exactly do you say? So the Rif says, you say Baruch Atah Adoi and then Noi Eloi Kei Eloi Hey and then Nu Melech Haolam Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol. But Rashi says no. Rashi says just say the words Baruch Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol. Rashi says all it is a hekera to escort the king, and we do whatever we want, and then we make a full-fledged bracha ala kois. But all that is required to say to make Havdalah is Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol. Interesting. Why would that be? I mean, the Aruch HaShulchan asks, why is it sufficient just to say Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol? Without a bracha, what does that accomplish? That's not a sufficient bracha. So we're going to declare an amazing chakira. Put on your Lamdasha glasses, and we're going to declare a beautiful chakira. What's the pshat? Shabbos is over. By the way, I want to bring to your attention, when is Shabbos over? How many minutes after Shkia? The opinion of Rabban Shal Kol Pnei Agoyla, the Posek of America, Zechatzak Levracha, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Moshe Paskind, that Matzoi Shabbos you need to wait 50 minutes after Shkia. My grandmother waited 45 minutes, my great-grandmother waited 42 minutes. They were great people, but they were not poskim. Rav Moshe Paskind in America, you need to wait 50 minutes. But I get a calendar from this orphanage, I get a calendar from this organization. Calendars are not poskim. Rav Moshe said you need to wait 50 minutes, which means for a Saturday night, you need to wait 50 minutes to daven Marav. Because our minhag is we wait until Matzah Shabbos to daven Marav. However, Rav Moshe does say, a Ben Torah should, if they're able to, wait 72 minutes. But that's only a chumrah. But Me'ikar Hadin, one is required to wait 50 minutes. Rav Moshe said he went outside in the mountains, and 50 minutes in New York City is the equivalent of 72 minutes in Europe. Okay. Why, when 50 minutes are over, are you still not allowed to do malacha until you make Havdalah? Shabbos is over. It's not the 7th day of the week. It's already Sunday. It's already Yom Rishon. Why are you not allowed to do malacha? So let's clarify Hakira. Is the pshat because Kedusha Shabbos continues until your Mavdil? So even though technically the next day of the week has come, but the sanctity of Shabbos... Okay, give me 1 second, I just have to change batteries. So is the pshat the reason I'm not allowed to do malacha when Shabbos is over because the sanctity of Shabbos continues, despite the fact that Shabbos is over, but the sanctity is there until I am sever it or I stop it and I'm mavdil. That's one way of understanding it. And by the way, that is the understanding of the Brisker Rav. The Brisker Rav understands the reason why I have to make Havdalah is because Kedushas Shabbos is nimshach and continues until I'm mavdil. And therefore, until I'm mavdil, I cannot do malacha. Because it's Shabbos. The sanctity of Shabbos continues. But says it's Eliezer, and says Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman, there's another way of looking at it. We could look at it different than the Brisker Rav. Really, when 50 minutes come, when 50 minutes after Shkia come, Shabbos is over. It is no longer Yom HaShvi. The sanctity is over. There is no more Kedusha Shabbos. After all, we don't sanctify the Shabbos. It's Baruch Atah Adoi, and then Noi Mekadesh Shabbos. God sanctifies Shabbos. Shkia comes in Friday, it's holy. Tzeisa Kechavim comes Saturday night, it's Chayil. That's it. The Kedusha of Shabbos has ended. So why am I not allowed to do Malacha? I'm not allowed to do Malacha because since I have a mitzvah to make Havdalah, since I'm required to make Havdalah, the Chachamim said, since you're obligated to make Havdalah, you're not allowed to do Malacha until you make Havdalah. So you'll say, what's the difference? Either way, I'm not allowed to do Malacha. But let's get these two tzadim. One side is like the Brisker Rav, that the sanctity of Shabbos continues until you make Havdalah. The other way to look at it is, no, the sanctity of Shabbos has ended. Shabbos has no sanctity anymore. There's no more Kedusha. But since I'm obligated to make Havdalah, the Chachamim said, you're not allowed to make Havdalah, you're not allowed to do Malacha until you make Havdalah. Now friends, comes the Aruch HaShulchan, and comes the Tzitz Eliezer, and they say, this new understanding of why you're not allowed to do Malacha explains the Shita of Rashi. Remember Rashi said for the Havdalah in Tefillah, or the Havdalah before Havdalah ala Kos, all you have to say is Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh L'Chayil, and it is not sufficient. And it is not sufficient in other words, Rashi holds it's sufficient, to say Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh L'Chayil, and I do not have to say a bracha like the Rif. Rashi says all I have to say is Baruch HaMavdil. Why would that be? The answer is, if the Kedusha of Shabbos continues until I'm Mavdil, I understand the Shita of the Rif, that I have to make a full-fledged bracha. But if the Kedusha of Shabbos has ended, and it's just that the Chachamim said, since you have to make Havdalah, you're not allowed to do Malacha yet, therefore we can understand the Shita of Rashi, that it is not required to say Hashem's name when you say Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh L'Chayil. But this would explain another interesting halacha. Says it Tzitz Eliezer, this explains the Israeli cab driver. Listen to this ga'inus of the Tzitz Eliezer and Rav Aaron Leib Steinman. If the reason I'm not allowed to do malacha is not because of Kedusha Shabbos, the Kedusha of Shabbos has ended with Tzeisa Kechavim. The reason I'm not allowed to do malacha is because since I have to make Havdalah, so the Chachamim said, don't do malacha until I do Havdalah. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, says Rav Aaron Leib Steinman, Kelkaltai hu takanasai. Why is a Jew not allowed to do malacha? Because he has to make Havdalah. But that's only if Havdalah is part of his program. But a Jew who doesn't make Havdalah, a Jew who doesn't accept Havdalah, a Jew who doesn't observe Havdalah, he's allowed to do malacha. There's no inherent Isser, you're not allowed to do malacha Saturday night. If the Isser of doing malacha is because the Kedusha of Shabbos is Nimshach, so then I couldn't hail down the religious cab driver because it's Shabbos for him. But now we're saying, no, it's not Shabbos. Shabbos is over. The reason you're not allowed to do malacha is because I have an obligation to make Havdalah. But that's only if Havdalah is part of my program. But if I don't do Havdalah, then I have no Isser. In other words, I'm not allowed to do malacha. We're saying now, the reason you can't do malacha is you can't do malacha before Havdalah. So how could you hail down the cab driver? He's not doing malacha before Havdalah. He doesn't make Havdalah. He doesn't make Havdalah. Haga ba'atzmacha, I believe, says the Tzitz Eliezer. We all know that one is not allowed to eat before Shacharis. According to the letter of the law, you can't eat before Shacharis. Not on Sunday, not on Monday, and not on Shabbos. You're allowed to drink tea without sugar. You're allowed to drink coffee without milk and sugar. That's the opinion of the Mishnah Berurah. Some are lenient, and they allow a little sugar, a little milk, but the Mishnah Berurah says no. Certainly to eat cake before Shacharis, you can only eat if you won't be able to daven otherwise. If you're weak and you can't daven. Someone who's young and healthy cannot eat anything before Shacharis. Who says that? The halacha. According to the Rambam, it might be D'oraisa lo soichlu al adam. You don't eat until you pray for your blood. Some people don't have energy, so they're allowed to eat to be able to daven. But one has to make an honest assessment, do they really have to eat before davening? So I have a shaila for you. You have an irreligious friend or relative that comes to your house 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you pour him a cup of coffee, and then you realize, oy vay, he didn't daven Shacharis, I'm being machshel him and eating before Shacharis, so you quickly run and grab it away from him. Imagine, Friday night someone comes to your house, and you give him a piece of challah, and then you realize, oy vay, he didn't eat before Shacharis, so what are you going to do? You're going to grab away the challah, because you're being machshel him in the Yisr of eating before Shacharis? Says the Tzitz Eliezer, Chas v'shalom. The Isser is, you can't eat before you daven Shacharis, but if he's a person whose Shacharis is not part of his program, he's not eating before Shacharis, he's not davening Shacharis. Only someone who davens Shacharis can't eat before Shacharis. Someone who doesn't daven Shacharis, says Rav Glatstein, there's no Isser for him to eat before, he's not eating before Shacharis. Shacharis is not part of his program. I have a question. You have an irreligious person, he comes to your house on Tuesday, you feed him something, say, oh no, you didn't make Havdalah, I can't feed you. No, you're not allowed to eat before Havdalah. By him, it's not before Havdalah. He doesn't make Havdalah. So says Rav Glatstein, says at Tzitz Eliezer, if we understand that the Isser of doing Malacha Saturday night is not because the sanctity of Shabbos continues, but rather because you're now to eat before Havdalah, we could say a Chidush that the Isser of eating before Havdalah is for those who Havdalah is part of their program. But what if Havdalah is not part of your program? Then perhaps there's no Isser of eating before Havdalah. This is the wondrous Chidush of the Ayelas HaShachar, Parshas Ekev, and the Rav Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg, Chelek Yud Aleph, Siman Lamed Aleph. Let me conclude by offering you one more Chidush, quoted by the Rebbe Beis Ephraim, Chelek Ches, Siman Kuf Yud Ches Ois Yod. So far we offer 2 suggestions as to why you're not allowed to do Malacha Saturday night before Havdalah. The Brisker Rav says, the Kedusha of Shabbos is Nimshach until you're Mavdil. Ayelas HaShachar Tzitz Eliezer says, no, Kedusha is Paka. But since I have to make Havdalah, the Chachamim said you're now to do Malacha before Havdalah. Rav Moshe Feinstein is quoted as saying something else. Rav Moshe is quoted by the Rabbi Glatstein, by the Rebbe Ephraim, saying, the truth is, when Shabbos is over, the Kedusha has left. But aside from the fact that Shabbos has Kedusha, that is Kaviv Kaima, that comes on the 7th day and leaves when the 7th day is over, there's another element of Kedusha that Shabbos has, and that is the element of Kedusha that you put into the Shabbos. Because you are Makabel Shabbos. Kabbalah Shabbos is like a neder. But that's only an observant Jew who is Makabel Shabbos. So an observant Jew, when Shabbos is over, the sanctity that Hashem put into the Shabbos is Paka. But your personal acceptance and neder of accepting Shabbos still stands until you sever it with Havdalah. But a Chiloni, an irreligious Jew, was never Makabel the Shabbos, and therefore he's allowed to do Malacha before he makes Havdalah. So these are a few different ideas of perhaps why one would be able to hail down a Israeli cab driver. Number one, we have the Svar, you tell him Shavua Tov, and he says Shavua Tov, and Rabbi Yosef Kayin says perhaps that's considered a Havdalah. The Ayelas HaShachar and the Tzitz Eliezer say that the Isser of doing Malacha Matzah Shabbos only is because you have to you're now do Malacha before Havdalah, but that's only if you plan on making Havdalah. And Rav Moshe is quoted as saying the reason you have to make Havdalah is because you are Makabel the Shabbos, but if you were not Makabel the Shabbos, you would be allowed to do Malacha first. So these are all eitzos to be able to go to Israel and hail a irreligious cab driver. My bracha is first, may we be zoicha to come to the end of this Magefa and be able to go to Eretz Yisrael and be able to enjoy a Shabbos in Eretz Yisrael and be able to hail down a cab driver. But also we should be zoicha that v'amech kulam tzadikim, we shouldn't have to come on to any of these kulais, because all of Yisrael should be shomrei Shabbos, shomrei Torah mitzvahs, lekayem ashenemar v'amech kulam tzadikim. Wishing everyone a great day. Feel good. Yeshuais, nechamais, refuais, lanu l'cha Yisrael. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.